Mated to the Lycan King. Chapter 9. Raven felt as though the walls of the infirmary still clung to her as she exited, Lucian's hand firmly clasped in her own. The news of their twins, carried within her, had settled into an almost serene hush between them. Though her heart brimmed with elation, she could sense Lucian's thoughts spinning. He had worn a look of wonder ever since the healer spoke the words, as though he wanted to shout his joy for the entire kingdom to hear. Yet, something kept him tethered. She paused in a quiet corridor, barely lit by a few flickering torches, and turned to face him. His golden eyes met her gaze, mirroring both delight and cautious worry. She rubbed her thumb gently across the top of his hand. "Lucian," she whispered, "you're trembling." His broad shoulders rose and fell with a silent breath as he pressed his free hand over hers, fingers brushing the faint swell of her stomach. "I'm not afraid of them," he said softly, "but I'm afraid of what this world can do. We've fought too many battles to ignore how fragile peace can be. And now that we know there are two precious lives instead of one." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Raven lifted her hand to his cheek. "You know how strong we are when we stand together. These children will have all the love and protection we can give them. You have led armies, brought kingdoms to heal, and given me a home I never imagined possible. When I look at you, I see the father they'll be proud of, and the mate I trust with my life." His eyes glistened with a wave of relief he seemed to be fighting not to show. He leaned down, pressing his forehead gently to hers. "We'll face it all then. Every danger, every threat, until they're safe." She nodded, savoring the moment's intimacy. It felt as though the entire castle held its breath around them, honoring the weight of their discovery. She guided him forward, and together they emerged into a torchlit hall. Servants, glimpsing their queen's glowing expression, offered respectful bows. Word of her pregnancy had already stirred hopeful excitement throughout the kingdom, and now the prospect of twins would only deepen that joy. Raven felt buoyed by it. No matter what hidden dangers lurked in the castle or beyond, she would carry this sense of possibility close to her heart. That evening, Lucian insisted on preparing a small supper for them both in one of the more private sitting rooms adjacent to their chambers. She found the table set simply but elegantly, a steaming tureen of soup, fresh bread, and a pitcher of mild juice she favored lately. He welcomed her into the room with a warm smile, pulling out her chair. She teased him for fussing too much, but she recognized the undercurrent of tenderness in his every movement. As they ate, Lucian tried to hide the storm of thoughts roiling behind his eyes. It was only when Raven laid her hand over his that he exhaled, letting his shoulders loosen. "You've always been steadfast," she said in a low, gentle voice. "Your mind rarely wanders like this." He admitted that thoughts of the cloaked stranger prowling their halls had not left him alone. He could not bear the idea of some threat lurking while Raven carried their children. It struck him like an itch he could not scratch. She squeezed his fingers, reminding him that Darius and Thalos, two of the most capable and loyal wolves she knew, were working tirelessly to unearth any sign of intrusion. He gave a curt nod, quiet determination settling around him. After they finished, he led her to the nursery he had spent weeks refining in secret. She expected it to be special. He had shown her once before, but she did not realize the extent of the changes. Entering, she found two small wooden cribs carefully arranged side by side, each lined with soft linens embroidered with subtle depictions of wolves howling under a crescent moon. Delicate quilts, lovingly stitched by pack artisans, lay draped over the rails. By the fireplace, there was now a plush rug Raven did not recall seeing before, depicting a stylized version of their castle and the forest that surrounded it. She crossed the room, hand pressed to her mouth in awe. Lucian followed, resting a palm gently on the curve of her back. Her voice trembled with unspoken gratitude as she asked him when he had found the time to prepare so many details. He explained that while she had been traveling south or attending to the kingdom's needs, he had quietly worked with trusted pack members on every nuance, hoping it might serve as a surprise. He had never expected the surprise to double in significance, twins instead of a single child, but it felt to him like destiny. She turned to him, tears glistening along her lashes. "It's perfect," she whispered. "They'll grow up surrounded by reminders of hope and love." He nodded, returning her quiet smile. She stepped into his arms, tilting her head back, meeting his gaze. The moment hung ripe with unspoken emotion. They shared a tender kiss, his lips warm and reassuring against hers. He drew her closer, murmuring endearments about her strength, her warmth, and the unbreakable bond they shared. She answered with equal passion, reveling in the heat of his breath and the strong press of his hands at her waist. Together, they sank into the softness of the rug, whispering about the future, about the home they would create for their daughters, and about how this moment right now was worth every obstacle they had ever faced. When at last they parted, breathless from the intensity of the exchange, she laughed softly against his chest. He playfully asked if she needed anything else. She teased that perhaps some sweets would do, seeing as how she was now eating for 3. He grinned, guiding her out of the nursery toward their private chambers, promising to send a servant for whatever she craved. They exchanged lingering touches and soft laughter, the heaviness in Lucian's eyes somewhat eased by her presence and the promise they had made to each other. The next morning dawned crisp and bright. While Raven remained to speak with the castle's steward about the upcoming expansions in the nursery, Lucian joined Darius and Thalos in the Great Hall. They were halfway through a conversation about reorganizing patrols when they were interrupted by a panicked guard who claimed to have caught a glimpse of the cloaked figure darting between storage rooms in the lower levels. The guard, chest-heaving, swore the figure had vanished behind a secret panel. Lucian's jaw tensed, and Darius's eyes gleamed with a readiness for pursuit. Thalos said nothing, but the subtle shift in his stance spoke volumes. They moved swiftly into the corridor, Lucian summoning a small contingent of trusted warriors. The idea of a spy within these walls, especially now, burned at Lucian's pride as a king. But more than that, it ignited a protective fury. He thought of Raven resting upstairs, unaware that danger might lurk so close. Darius led the way, guided by the guard's directions. The path they took led them to a rarely used storage wing near the castle's eastern wall, filled with old crates of supplies. Dust motes danced in the narrow shafts of light from high windows. They fanned out, covering every exit, while Thalos silently tested each crate and shelf for hidden panels or false walls. At first, the place seemed quiet, no sign of movement. Then a blur of black cloth darted between 2 tall piles of broken furniture. Darius shouted a warning, and the pursuit began. Lucian's wolf bristled within him, lending him speed as he cleared debris in pursuit. The figure scrambled along a tight passage, nearly toppling ancient barrels. But Darius lunged forward, grappling them around the waist. A struggle ensued, the figure twisted with a surprising strength, nearly slipping free until Thalos materialized on the other side, swiftly hooking an arm beneath the stranger's shoulder. 2 of Lucian's warriors joined in, pinning the cloaked figure firmly. Their hood slipped back, revealing the sweat-drenched features of a person not yet beyond their youth, though their eyes shone with a guarded defiance. Lucian approached, breath ragged, and met the figure's glare. He demanded to know what business they had sneaking through the castle. At first, the stranger refused to speak, spitting at the ground. Darius drew a low growl from his chest, cautioning the figure to cooperate if they valued their life. Thalos, stoic as ever, studied them with a penetrating intensity that left no doubt they would glean the truth one way or another. At last, the captive muttered a name that froze Lucian in place. It was a name not heard in years, associated with old grudges and a lineage once aligned with Gregor. The figure claimed that they served an ancient family wronged by the monarchy, though the details remained shrouded in cryptic references. They glowered at Lucian, then hissed that Raven's powers and her unborn children would soon prove essential to their cause. The claim hammered at Lucian's composure. He demanded to know more. But the figure refused, saying only that the kingdom's peace was an illusion, and that more shadows gathered just beyond the borders. Darius and Thalos exchanged uneasy looks. This news, if it was true, might indicate a threat far larger than a single spy. Lucian fought to keep his wolf in check. Every fiber of his being roared at the idea that someone plotted against Raven and the twins she carried. His voice trembled with barely contained rage as he ordered the figure secured in the castle dungeons. There would be a formal interrogation to extract the truth of whatever vile plan was brewing. Meanwhile, Raven sensed something shift in the castle's air as she concluded her meeting with the steward. That creeping sense of unease, which had plagued her sporadically, once again wormed its way into her chest. Without waiting for an escort, she made her way swiftly toward the great hall, guided by the tension that thrummed like an undercurrent through the corridors. She found Lucian standing among a group of his warriors, jaw clenched as he dismissed them. Darius and Thalos lingered behind him, wearing expressions that spelled trouble. Her arrival turned every eye in her direction. Lucian's features softened only a fraction upon seeing her, a silent admission of the inner battle he was waging. She could all but taste the worry rolling off him in waves. He explained that they had captured the cloaked intruder, who had insinuated there was a larger power behind them, possibly fueled by old grudges and sinister designs on Raven's elemental magic. She felt a chill rake her spine, even as she squared her shoulders, refusing to let fear show in her eyes. They moved to a more private chamber to speak. Lucian relayed every detail from the confrontation. Raven's pulse thudded as she realized that old loyalties to Gregor, or even older clans, might not have died with the last battles. She recalled how not long ago Kieran faced obstacles in the southern territory from lingering rogues. The idea that her children could be used, or threatened, sent fury surging through her. She pressed a protective hand against her belly, locking eyes with Lucian. "We can't let them think we're weak," she said quietly. "But we also can't risk panic in the kingdom." Lucian nodded. "Darius, Thalos, and I will handle the interrogation. We'll root out every last detail. No harm will reach you or our daughters." A strong part of Raven wanted to march down to the dungeons herself, but reason and concern for her unborn twins guided her to trust Lucian's judgment. She placed a hand on his chest, calming the tension there. He drew a steady breath and promised to keep her informed, ensuring no secrets festered between them. Before they parted, he pressed a loving kiss to her temple, whispering that he would handle the immediate threat. While Lucian and the others occupied themselves with the captured spy, Raven felt a tug on her consciousness, a faint stirring that she had come to associate with her twin bond. She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly, and saw Kieran's face in her mind. He appeared calm yet conflicted, set against a backdrop of the southern castle's great hall. In a blink, the vision sharpened, as if their magical connection transported her senses. She saw him pacing, Ella looking on worriedly, while unfamiliar wolves gathered outside, voices raised in protest. It looked as though Kieran was contending with a group loyal to the old regime who refused to accept him as Alpha. In the flicker of that bond, Kieran seemed to sense Raven as well. Their twin powers intersected, fire dancing on Raven's side, a swirl of wind on his. They shared a silent exchange of understanding, a swirl of intangible emotions. Kieran's frustration, Ella's quiet yet formidable support, and the undercurrent of brewing discord in the south all filtered into Raven's awareness. She ached to stand by him, but she also knew her place was here, dealing with her own immediate threats. She reached out mentally with a wave of reassurance, letting him feel her empathy and confidence in his leadership. When the connection ebbed, Raven opened her eyes to find she had been gripping the edge of a table. She inhaled deeply, forcing the swirl of images and emotions to recede. Her wolf stirred anxiously, as though it wished to run to Kieran's side, but she placed a hand over her belly, calming herself. She would trust Kieran to handle his region with the same resolve he had shown at Ella's Luna ceremony, and in the months following. News from the dungeons came slowly. Late in the day, Lucian sought Raven out. She noticed that a fine tension clung to him, the lines around his eyes deep with concern. He confirmed that the stranger had mentioned an ancient group, rumored to be rallying under new leadership. According to the spy's vague hints, the group believed that Raven's elemental powers, and now the potential of twin heirs, could be exploited for political leverage. Some spoke of capturing or controlling her. Others whispered more dire ambitions. The idea curdled Lucian's temper. Raven listened quietly, determination tightening her jaw. "We can't let them spread fear here," she said firmly, "but we also can't pretend the threat will vanish. If they have allies lurking in shadows, we must be ready." Lucian agreed. He and Darius began drafting plans to reinforce border patrols. Thalos volunteered to lead special scouting parties, scouring the territory for any suspicious activity. The revelation weighed heavily on them all. Raven sensed Lucian's frustration peaking whenever he remembered that she was carrying twins. The fear he tried to suppress flared in his eyes when he thought she was not looking. That night in their chambers, Raven found Lucian standing at the window, gazing at the moonlit courtyard. She approached, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. His hand rose to cover hers, though his posture remained taut. "We've endured so much," she said softly, resting her head against his back. "We won't bend to a new threat, no matter how cunning." He turned, drawing her into his arms. "I can't lose you," he breathed. "I can't lose them. If I have to fight day and night to keep you all safe, I will." She pressed a comforting kiss to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Then we'll fight side by side, because these pups will need both of us. I trust you more than I trust the sun to rise." A tender hush passed between them, broken only by the faint crackle of the fireplace. He stroked her hair, then guided her to the settee near the fire. They sat close, legs entangled, sharing quiet words and gentle touches that soothed the day's tension. He traced the shape of her hand, marveling at how delicate it seemed, despite the strength he knew it possessed. She, in turn, ran her fingertips along his jaw, appreciating the warmth and solidity that had sheltered her through every storm. Their words drifted from worries to hopes, from fears to the tender dream of hearing two little voices echo in these halls. In a moment of unspoken understanding, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a slow and reverent kiss that carried the weight of devotion. She breathed him in, letting the warmth of his body anchor her to the present. Their heartbeat seemed to synchronize, a quietly powerful rhythm that reminded them both why they fought so fiercely for each other. His arms tightened around her, the fireplace's glow dancing over their intertwined silhouettes, framing a scene of intimate resolve. Morning arrived with a chill wind that rustled the flags atop the castle walls. Darius and Thalos, newly invigorated by the challenge of stamping out hidden threats, organized an early training session with the elite warriors of the pack. Lucian joined them on the training grounds, overseeing mock battles and sharing defensive tactics gleaned from his own experiences. Raven watched from a stone balcony, content for now to observe rather than participate, although she felt occasional pangs of longing for the days when she would dive into a spar without hesitation. When the session ended, Darius climbed the steps to her vantage point, sweat beading along his brow. He offered a polite bow before leaning on the rail beside her. She commented on how impressive the drills looked, and he nodded, mentioning that it felt good to prepare, especially with a real threat looming. He paused, searching her face before adding that he had been reflecting on his own life, how, after so much violence and routine, he wondered if there might be more for him. She turned to him, empathy softening her gaze. He admitted that seeing her and Lucian, and even Kieran and Ella, forging bonds that reached beyond mere duty, made him realize he wanted something deeper than endless guard posts. She clasped his shoulder, meeting his eyes. "You've always been loyal and brave, Darius. You deserve to find happiness beyond war. I can see in your eyes that you're ready to let something else in." He huffed a small laugh, somewhat self-conscious. "We'll see. For now, I'll focus on keeping you and the kingdom safe. But maybe one day." His voice trailed off, but Raven recognized the thoughtful undertone of a man reconsidering his place in the world. Thalos joined them soon after, quiet as ever, Raven greeted him with a warm smile, asking about his own reflections. He shrugged lightly, but something in his stance hinted at an openness she had not often seen. He admitted that he had begun to think about what lay beyond the next battle, perhaps a chance for him to find a real connection, just as others had found. Raven teased that she sensed a spark in him, waiting for the right moment. He gave a small, rare grin and said he hoped if that moment arose, he would recognize it. While they spoke, Lucian approached. He wore a satisfied expression from seeing the warriors united, though the weight of potential danger still lingered behind his eyes. He exchanged glances with Raven, and she offered him a reassuring nod, letting him know that all was well. By midday, messages arrived from the Southern Territory. Kieran had faced down a band of holdouts who still pledged loyalty to the old ways. They had challenged his authority, but with Ella's unwavering support, he emerged victorious. The letter described how Ella's presence as Luna inspired even the skeptics. She radiated calm yet resolute leadership that matched Kieran's firm stance. Reading the letter aloud to Lucian, Raven felt a swell of pride. She recalled the shy, uncertain Ella who once feared the mate bond, and now pictured a confident Luna standing side by side with an equally confident Alpha. It seemed that Ella's acceptance of Kieran went beyond love. It was a partnership, forging a stable path for the Southern Pax. Raven felt the echo of her twin bond again, a pulse of relief and triumph from Kieran. She closed her eyes, imagining him reading her own letter or sensing her silent congratulations. Their elemental magic simmered in the space between them, a comforting reminder that distance did not erase their sibling connection. As dusk approached, Raven found Lucian had prepared yet another thoughtful gesture, a private dinner in a cozy study not far from their chambers. Candles glowed in stands around a circular table laden with simple but well-made dishes. He pulled out her chair, joking that she might be tired of all his fussing by now. She retorted that she found his attention to be increasingly charming and occasionally comedic, watching him constantly checking if she needed a cushion or more water. They ate in companionable quiet at first. Eventually, Lucian brought up the possibility of exploring name choices for their daughters. Raven lit up, though she admitted she had not settled on anything yet. They tossed around a few possibilities, laughing when they disagreed or when one suggested something too grand or too plain. The conversation turned serious when Raven reflected on wanting names that symbolized perseverance or unity, to honor the battles they had fought to reach this moment. Lucian nodded earnestly, promising that whatever names they chose would reflect not only their heritage but the bright future they intended to build. Midway through the meal, a sharp knock shattered their peaceful moment. Thalos entered, face pale but composed. He reported that under interrogation, the stranger had confessed to being part of a larger movement, a group that apparently spanned across various packs still bitter about the monarchy's consolidation of power. Though the details were murky, it seemed they believed Raven's elemental gifts could be harnessed, or forcibly used, to restore what they deemed a proper balance of power. Worse still, rumor held that a newly emerged leader, unknown to them by name, was orchestrating these plots, possibly forging alliances with rogues or other factions outside the kingdom. Lucian set down his fork, tension radiating through his shoulders. Raven's pulse raced at the idea of unknown enemies plotting specifically to exploit her. She felt her wolf stir, protective anger flaring at the notion that her unborn children might be caught in the crosshairs of this conspiracy. "We'll not wait for them to strike," Lucian said, voice low and resolute. "We shore up our defenses now, double the patrols, seal every gap in the border." Raven rose, pressing a hand to the table to steady herself. Her gaze flicked between Lucian and Thalos. "I need to help," she said, unwavering. "I may not be out front in battle, but this is my power they covet, my family they threaten." Lucian nodded, though she saw the flicker of worry pass through his eyes at the idea of her involving herself more deeply. He did not stop her. Not this time. They had fought side by side too often to deny the inevitability of their partnership. They convened a meeting in the war room where Darius awaited them, armed with maps and a list of potential vulnerabilities in the kingdom's borders. The conversation bristled with urgency. Raven contributed insight about which packs might be swayed by old rivalries or grudges, while Lucian, Darius, and Thalos discussed the best distribution of soldiers to both secure the perimeter and maintain a calm front for the kingdom's citizens. The plan began to form: covert scouting missions, ramped up training, and strategic vigilance. They agreed that no public announcement of the threat should be made yet, wary of causing undue panic. As the meeting drew to a close, Raven placed a hand over her belly, a quiet determination resonating through her. Darius noticed and offered a respectful half-bow. "No harm will come to the queen or her children," he said. "Not while we have breath." Thalos nodded solemnly. "We've withstood traitors and tyrants before. We'll stand again." Lucian, glimpsing Raven's fatigue, wrapped an arm around her, guiding her out into the corridor. They walked in silence, each lost in their own swirl of thoughts. The castle lights had been dimmed for the evening, leaving only the soft glow of wall sconces to guide their steps. When they reached their chambers, Raven felt the weight of the day pressing on her. Lucian led her to their bed, helping her settle against the plush pillows. She caught the flicker of guilt in his eyes, as though he blamed himself for subjecting her to such stress while pregnant. She stroked his cheek, voice gentle. "I've chosen this path willingly. We face it together. Always." He closed his eyes, absorbing the reassurance. They rested side by side, the hush of the castle lending a sense of calm after the flurry of revelations. She felt his hand slip beneath her own, resting on her belly, as though he sought a tangible reminder that despite the looming threats, their love persisted in forming something miraculous. She drifted off to sleep that way, lulled by the steady cadence of his breathing. The next morning, action reverberated throughout the kingdom. Warriors sharpened swords, trained in the yards, and scouted far into the territory. Darius coordinated these efforts, stepping effortlessly into a role that combined discipline with compassion. Thalos quietly sifted through intelligence reports, scrutinizing any rumor or odd occurrence in the outer villages. Raven spent some of her time with the castle's scribes, ensuring lines of communication remained open to the southern packs. She sent messages to Kieran hinting at the potential danger but not wanting to alarm him until she had more certainty. A few nights later, a hush fell over the castle halls when, during a secondary interrogation, the cloaked stranger revealed an even more harrowing truth. Some among these secret factions believed they could forcibly extract Raven's magic if they controlled her body and mind at the moment of childbirth. The audacity of the plan both stunned and enraged those present. Darius demanded the stranger expand on how they hoped to achieve something so cruel, but the captive offered only cryptic references to ancient rituals and alliances with exiled wolves versed in forbidden practices. Even Thalos, usually unflappable, voiced a rare tremor of anger. Word of this revelation quickly reached Raven, delivered by Lucian in person. He found her in the library, leafing through old genealogical records in search of any mention of lost clans or lineages that might connect to this threat. She braced herself against a table, teeth clenched as he relayed what the captive had said. "They will not lay a single finger on me or our children," she said, each word sharpened by fury. Her wolf raged behind her eyes, a silent vow that no one would tear her family apart. Lucian tried to keep a facade of calm, but she noticed the rigid set of his shoulders. He reached for her, enveloping her in his warmth. "We'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Whatever it takes." Although the kingdom went about its daily routines, merchants tending stalls, children running in the courtyard, the tension among the leadership grew palpable. Raven held private discussions with Darius and Thalos, discovering in each of them a well of personal conviction that lent fresh intensity to their roles. Darius, once content in unwavering service, now admitted he looked beyond mere duty and sought to preserve a future that might hold promise for him too, possibly even the potential for a family of his own. Thalos, similarly, opened up about the realization that life was too short to remain entirely closed off, hinting he might be ready for companionship. She recognized in them both a deepening sense of belonging to this kingdom, a motivation no longer limited to blades and battle cries. Meanwhile, glimpses of Kieran and Ella's progress in the south arrived by letter. Kieran's words carried a tone of cautious success. He had managed to convert or drive out the fiercest dissenters, while Ella's composed leadership drew more neutrals to support them. In reading these accounts, Raven sensed not only pride, but also an undercurrent of trepidation. She recalled their twin bond, certain that Kieran felt the same prickling of tension that weighed upon her. One evening, as the castle turned quiet, Raven sat in her chambers, idly rubbing her abdomen, while Lucian stood near the fireplace. He seemed lost in his thoughts, until she gently called his name, beckoning him to join her on the cushions by the hearth. He settled in beside her, stroking her hair as she leaned her head on his shoulder. They began discussing the future of their daughters, conjuring images of them toddling around the castle halls, learning to harness their own wolf instincts and possibly some hint of elemental power. The thought both thrilled and intimidated them. Lucian confessed that he sometimes lay awake at night, imagining every lesson he would teach them: how to track scents, to guard their pack, to love wholeheartedly without fear. Raven found tears of joy gathering as she pictured two little ones climbing into their laps, listening to bedtime stories about how their mother and father brought peace to the kingdom. Yet the mention of the potential threat lurking just beyond the horizon cast a shadow on those sweet visions. She squeezed Lucian's hand. They shared the silent promise that no matter the cost, they would preserve their daughter's right to a safe, loving home. When the final revelation spilled from the captive stranger's lips, it was nearly midnight. Darius and Thalos had spent hours in questioning, and word was sent for Lucian and Raven to come hear what the prisoner had to say. Darius stood guard, arms folded. Thalos maintained his typical composure, though Raven could detect the tension in his jaw. The prisoner, chained to a heavy wooden chair, glowered with thinly veiled resentment. Speaking in low, halting tones, they revealed that a powerful rogue group, long in hiding, planned to spark an uprising once they had the means to siphon or weaponize Raven's elemental magic. Their leader, known simply as the Spectre, believed that controlling Raven, or her unborn children, would grant them unimaginable power. The mention of either abducting the children or forcing Raven's compliance ignited a cold fury in Lucian's eyes. He pressed for more details, but the captive insisted they knew little else. Raven's heart hammered at every malicious word. The final blow came when the captive hissed that time was on the rogue group's side, and that infiltration had already begun in other packs. The captive ended with a smug warning that any attempt to hide behind castle walls would fail. A deep stillness filled the chamber. Raven felt a swirl of protective rage combined with a chilling dread. She glanced at Lucian, who stood rigid, every muscle coiled as though waiting to snap. Darius cast his eyes downward, torn between anger and fear, and Thalos's fingers flexed on the hilt of his sword. Lucian, fighting to contain his wrath, dismissed the guards to return the prisoner to a locked cell. He then turned to Raven, voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "We can't stand idle," he said. "We face war or subjugation if we don't act." The horror of it churned in Raven's stomach, but she squared her shoulders, reaching for Lucian's hand. "We'll defend this kingdom and our family," she said. "We've done it before, but this time, we have more to protect than ever." Thalos quietly affirmed they would mobilize the best warriors for immediate reconnaissance. Darius pledged to lead specialized units to gather intelligence from the outlying territories, ensuring no allied pack was swayed by the Spectre's schemes. Raven found a measure of solace in the unwavering loyalty these two men offered. She realized they were no longer merely subordinates. They had become friends, each shaped by the hardships and hopes that bound them to her. When at last they left the chamber, Raven and Lucian found themselves alone in a torchlit corridor. She trembled slightly from the combined rush of fear, anger, and maternal protectiveness. He slid an arm around her waist, guiding her toward their private quarters. They walked in silence for a few moments until she stopped, pressing her face to his chest. "I'll never let them touch me or our pups," she whispered, voice full of steel. "Never." He wrapped both arms around her, pressing his lips to her temple. "We'll stand as one," he vowed. "No threat, new or old, will break us." She tilted her head, capturing his gaze. In that instant, all the chaos of looming war fell away. She saw only the man who had once found her wandering and lost, the mate who had walked through every storm by her side, the father who would do anything to keep their children safe. They kissed, a slow, heartbreaking clash of desperation and devotion. Even as they parted, the tension remained, but it was threaded with a fierce resolve that now bound them tighter than ever. Their footsteps led them back to their room, where the faint glow of a single lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls. She settled on the edge of the bed, and he knelt before her, resting his head gently against her abdomen. She threaded her fingers through his hair, her own eyes stinging with unshed tears. "We'll do this together," she whispered, voice unsteady. "The four of us." He nodded, lips curving into a soft smile against her belly. For a moment, the night breathed quietly around them, as though granting them a fleeting respite. Through the window, distant stars blinked in an endless sky, unaware of mortal struggles. She allowed herself one lingering moment of peace, inhaling Lucian's comforting scent, believing that love would be enough to face whatever revelations of darkness lay ahead. They settled into bed, bodies curved toward each other, fingers entwined. The gloom in the corners of the room seemed pushed back by the faint warmth of their bond. Raven allowed her eyelids to slip closed, nestling into Lucian's steady heartbeat. She did not know what horrors might await when day broke again, but she knew one unassailable truth: they would stand firm. Even as the kingdom's shadows lengthened with the looming threat of a group bent on exploiting her power, even as dangerous alliances possibly formed on the fringes of their territory, even as the burden of leadership and parenthood weighed upon them like never before, they had each other. That was how they had always won. That was how they would win again. Daybreak would bring renewed urgency and fresh challenges, double patrols, new alliances, letters to be sent to Kieran and Ella warning them of the threat, and more relentless interrogation of the spy in their dungeon. Raven knew that the path forward bristled with peril, that every moment of calm might be undone by the next revelation of betrayal. Yet she felt Lucian's breath against her cheek, the subtle movement of her twins within her womb, and the faint stirring of the wolf inside her own chest. Such comforting reminders that nothing, no matter how dire, could fully extinguish the light they had built. And somewhere in the silent corridors and unseen corners, the Spectre's agent lay locked away, plotting or awaiting rescue, while outside the castle walls, hidden eyes took note of the kingdom's efforts. Their final battle had yet to be decided, but Raven closed her eyes on that thought, feeling the hush of the night settle around her. Tomorrow they would stand hand in hand as the day's first rays lit the horizon. Let the enemy come. They had faced nightmares before. This time, they were fighting for something far more precious, the future of two tiny sparks of life, who carried the promise of a brighter tomorrow.